name is Bartłomiej Narożnik. I'm a software developer for PFA. I also teach people how to use Angular and help companies to migrate their Angular 1x applications to new Angular. And today I would like to tell you a little more about Angular 5. 3 weeks ago there was new stable version 5.0. So let's see what has changed there. So how many of you have been using the version 5 before? Okay. How many of you knows everything about Angular 5? Okay, me neither, but I know a lot and I would like to share it with you today. So let's start with the version. So Angular from version 2, they introduced something that it's called semantic versioning. And it basically consists with 2 digits. So the last one, change on the last one means that there is no features, no breaking changes, only bug fixes. When there is the change on second digit, it means there are still no breaking changes, but there are some features. So for our 5 version, it means we should expect new features and potential breaking changes. It's potential because if it's breaking or not, it depends on how extent you are using Angular in your and what exactly parts of Angular you are using. So it might be breaking for you, but it's not for sure. So let's start from build optimizer. There were some changes in the build process for Angular. So build optimizer is a tool, the CLI tool, which has two main tasks. First is making the parts of Angular as pure. So what it basically means that if the function is marked as pure and its result is nowhere used, it means that it can be safely removed. So it's a part of the tree shaking mechanism. And another task of build optimizer is to removing the Angular decorators from the runtime code. Angular decorators are consumed during compile time, so we have no use of them in the runtime code. It can be safely removed, earning some space, making application code a little smaller. So this build optimizer is pretty useful, but it's not completely not completed for any cases. So there are some known issues for large applications consisting more than 1,000 components. So Angular team is working strongly on it, and they will soon release it as a default option. For now, you can it's enabled for production builds. But if you'd like to take it slow, if you'd like to not use it, you can always remove it by a flag. So there is another cool feature about compilation. In TypeScript 2.3, they have introduced something that is called TypeScript transform, and Angular compiler is hooked into that with new version. And what it means for us is that when we change the application code, not all applications will have to be recompiled. It will be just the parts that are affected by our changes. So it can reduce dramatically the speed of recompilation. So they say it will be around 40% for normal builds, but it's pretty impressive for Angular I/O. They have turned it on, and they were able to decrease from 40 seconds to 2 seconds. So it's around 95% of speed gain. You can turn it on using a flag and reserve with AOT. So another changes for this time Angular Universal. So for those of you who don't know, I think it has been told in the previous sessions, it's a part of Angular that is responsible for server-side rendering. So you can render your page on server-side, then just pass it through to the client, and you can gain some performance here, sometimes you have to deal with some web crawlers that don't support JavaScript, so you would have to do it that way as well. So there are 2 modules in Angular. server transfer state module and browser transfer state module, and they are responsible for transferring state between server and client. So if you have some calls in your server to other HTTP services, you don't have to do it again. You can just transfer the state between server and the browser. So another change for Angular Universal is change for DOM engine. They have dropped support for parse 5. Now they use Domino.js, which is slightly better. It has a little more DOM manipulations included, and it also plays better with some JavaScript frameworks that are not server aware. Sorry. And there is a little change in decorators. Now it's a little easier for us. We can use. There is a special lowering included in some fields like use factor, use value, and data. So now we can use, for example, dynamic values that are calculated at runtime, or we can use lambda expressions as well. And there is a change in reflection. The injector, the reflective injector, has been dropped. Now there is static injector used. Difference in the usage is not that big, but there is a difference in of insight of the code. A reflective injector uses reflect polyfill, so now we don't have to include it in your projects, and for most of the projects it will make it a little bit smaller. So if you have been looking closely to near talk, you already know the new flag for zones. You can now bypass zones using ngZone nope flag, and that way you can make it a little bit for performance-focused applications. It will be a bit better. There was also a lot of improvement of making the zones faster. So even without doing this, with the 5, you will have a little more improvement of performance with the zones. So now about templates. There are some new cool features with the templates. So first of them is option full template check. So before when we had some problems, we had some typo and an error in templates. We would not know that until actual run of the code, and it could be pretty nasty. So now, if you use this option, you can the template will be validated during compile time. So, for example, if you have some pipe, it can be validated whether the parameter argument used is correct, and it will print this nice message for you. If, for example, if you use lowercase on something that is not a string, and it can also look into the directive variables. So if you have a typo there, it will show you the error, and what's pretty cool, it will even try to figure out what's the actual problem and how could you fix that. It's still a little early phase, so I think it's a nice feature just to check it out. But probably before going full scale, you should have to wait for little patch fixes until they get rid of those small problems that they are for this feature. And another option for templates is preserved Whitespaces. What it does, it's actually quite obvious. It will the flag will keep the white spaces of your templates. If it's set to false, it will just rip it all. So you can turn it on or off in various places of your application. You can use it for module, but you can also use it for component, meaning that the whole template for component will have this this option included. But you can go even deeper and use it for just a part of your HTML calls, and you can even use some new expression called NGSP. It's not a B, it's the second letter is G. It will be swapped during compile time to a space. So you can make sure that there will be space in there, whatever happens. But you cannot use it more than once. So in this last example, it will be only one space in your HTML. And of course, what happens inside pre-tags stays in pre-tags, so those will not be affected as expected. For now, it's true, so it's not a breaking change. It looks exactly like it was before, but you can make it change it to false wherever you need. So when I first learned about it, I thought it's a pretty nice feature, but maybe not so useful. But it turned out Whitespaces are responsible for about 6% of our generated code, so probably it's worth a shot. So now HTTP client. Some of you probably know this class. It has been introduced in Angular in version 4.3. So it has some cool features like typings in response. JSON is the default result, so you don't need to parse. There are interceptors which are very useful in cases like global exception handling or authorization or other stuff. And there is also some support for unit testing. So why should you know that? It's because now the old HTTP module is deprecated. It will be removed in version 6. So familiarize with HTTP client. It's in the HTTP common package. And in 5 there is a nice improvement for HTTP headers and params. You don't need to create classes now. You can just use object literals. So like here in the upper part is the way we have been using it before. Now you can write it with little less of code. And Angular router, there are some important changes there as well, but not breaking changes, rather new features. There are new events, 8 of them: guard, check, activation, resolve, and child activation, start and end events, so that they can allow you to have a little more control or have a little more insight of what's happening inside the controller. So just an example of how you could use the last 2 of them, the child activation. For example, you could make your spinner that starts whenever child activation starts, and the spinner stops when the child activation ends. And another new feature of router is same URL navigation. There was a problem in Angular when you would like to reload the page when the navigation to the same route has been called. It was just dropped. Nothing happened. But there are some scenarios you would like to reload your page actually. So now you can do it using this on same URL navigation. It can be set to reload or ignore. Unfortunately, it's not there yet. It will be. It's scheduled for 5.1, so you will have to wait for it a little. Probably will be somewhere in December, so you can treat it as a Christmas gift from Angular team. Now PWA. There were a lot of noise about changes for PWA in Angular. There is a service worker module in Angular for some time, but it has been in beta ever since. So now they give this module a little more love, and it's fully functional. So it has three main features. First of them is caching. It will allow the cacher application. By default, it caches static assets, but it can also, if you configure it, it can also cache the external resources like some icons or images from CDN. It can cache route redirection or even dynamic content. So if you call to your backend, it can also be cached. And there are different strategies how the cache works. It can get data from cache, or it can try to get the download from the backend first. Another feature of Service Worker is push notifications. You can subscribe to it, or you can send it. So here's the example. I hope you see it. Yes, I think it's visible. So here's the example of subscribing to push notifications. There is SW push class in the Service Worker module, where you can subscribe to and receive the push notifications from your application, and do whatever you want with that. And the last feature of Service Worker is what's called update flow. So basically, if you have PWA application, you are not allowed to break user workflow when the new version of application is deployed. So Service Worker allows you to do that. There is SW update class which can support version changing. So you can check if there is new version, and if there is display some message for user, and then he can decide whether he wants to update or not. You probably seen in some web pages that this display that there is a new version, and if you would like, please refresh your page, or please click here. So it's exactly how can you do that in Angular. And there was a significant changes in INTN. It was completely ripped off. They have dropped support for INTL. So basically, it means now Angular does not rely on browser that much. Instead, it uses common local data repository. So the upside is that you don't need INTL polyfill anymore, unless you would like to use old pipes, which are deprecated right now, and they are in different module. And downside is that the pipes have been changed. All of them had been rewritten. So they have a little more. There's a little change in them, but there is another parameter, the last parameter, locale, where you can set the locale you would like to use. The default is, of course, American, but if you would like to change that, you can do it in this very simple steps. So here is the example of changing the culture to Polish. What has changed in pipes? The date pipe, there are some new formats there. There is now support for time zone, so you can display your date taking into consideration what is the time zone. And of course, there is a locale support. So here are three examples. First one is just a default usage of date pipe. In the second, the locale is changed to your favorite, and there you can also use a custom format if you would like. There are some breaking changes in date pipes. Not much of them, but there are a few. So this table is available on Angular IO page. So if you were using date pipe, maybe you would like to just see if it affects you. Probably normally it shouldn't, but in some cases it will. And there is a new option in forms. Also, if you were watching Nir's talk, you probably know it. There is a new update on option. It can update on blur, and it can update on submit. So it's something we know from AngularJS. It's available on template-driven forms, but also for reactive forms. There is equivalent of that. And there are few changes in animations. So now the limit takes a negative value, and what it means that it will take elements from the end rather from the beginning. So in this case, we query for item classes, elements with item class, and it will take only three last of them. And there are new transition aliases. So instead of using when you have indexes of using 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. Now you can use increment aliases, and there is also decrement. And there is pretty useful change called validation of animations. So in this case here, when we had a typo in a previous Angular, it could lead to some unexpected behavior. Like in this exact example, it would multiply your elements instead of hiding or showing them. So now there is a validation of animations. So instead of that, you'll get the message that there is something wrong with your animation and you should fix that. And finally, the new Angular supports RxJS 5.5. There are a lot of cool features there, but most important is lettable operators. So basically, it helps a lot with the tree shaking mechanism. So usage of that is pretty simple. Instead of having functions chained to your observable, you can now use pipe function and put your operators there. So is Angular mature with the new version? If you look at the age of Angular, it's not pretty old. It has over a year, the Angular 2+. So it's not that old, but the power of Angular is about dynamic. It's about how many is happening here. The community is really big. There are over 500 people committers of Angular code. There are two big companies involved: Microsoft for TypeScript and Angular for and Google for Angular itself. And there is a lot happening. Roughly every week there is a patch version. So now we have 5.02, and it has been less than 3 weeks since Angular 5 is there. There are 3 monthly versions after major, and twice a year there is a major version which is compatible with the previous one. So there is a lot happening. There are almost 9,000 commits in total in the Angular repository. So I've been counting, and between versions 4 and 5 there were 1,932 commits. So if you divide it by the number of days, it will be roughly 9 commits per every day, calendar day. So I say it's impressive. And if you look for the activity on repositories in the past year, well, the king is only one here. So it's almost lunchtime. I'm sure everyone is hungry, but if you are hungry for more knowledge about Angular 5, there will be new special edition of Behind the Code magazine, where I was invited to write in a little more details and a little more about what's happening and what will be in new Angular 5. And it will be available for download later this week. So thank you, and have a good lunch.